Right, good evening everyone. As my brother said, good crowd here again, and I hope you enjoy this talk. It is the second one that I've done. I did one in June, which covered the lead up to the First World War and the first couple of years, sort of up to about the middle of 1916. And this one is going to carry on from where I left off. The first 5 minutes or so, I'm going to recap some of the things I went over in the first one, in case you missed it. There are DVDs available of the whole talk. If you want to, you can sell those at half time, just £1 each. So basically, Queen's Market War, Part 2, 1916 to round about 1920. Pictures on the front are of two of the things that are actually in the church itself. Brass commemoration plaque and the Book of Remembrance, which the pages are turned at regular intervals so that all the people are actually in the book from this area get a showing at a regular interval. I'm just going to go on to the start of the First World War. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that Bedford was invaded by the Scots. Within a couple of weeks of the war, First World War being declared on the 4th of August, about 2 weeks afterwards, 60 or 70 trainloads of Scots arrived in Bedford, around about 17,000 of them in total, which meant that the population of Bedford increased by about 50%, because there was only about 30,000 living in the town at the time, and as I say, there's probably over 20,000 in total, but firstly about 15 to 17,000 arrived all in one go. It was actually the entire 51st Highland Division, so it included a whole load of different regiments. Various regiments were billeted in various areas of the town. We've got a couple of pictures here. Gordon Highlanders, this is in Hurst Grove up the top. These are the buildings are in Hurst Grove in the background. And it's actually in front of where Alan's club is, where they're actually sitting on the ground or sitting there having a photograph taken. The Scots actually left by early summer. Some left earlier, but the last of them had all basically gone by the early summer of 1915. And there's a picture, it's a fairly rare stereoscope picture of the Black Watch leaving Beverley Crescent. And if any of you know Beverley Crescent, you'll see that there's no houses on the inside part. Just only part of the outside wing of Beverley Crescent had houses built on at that point. Once the Scots left, all sorts of others arrived. The Monmouths from South Wales, they arrived shortly after the Scots left, and this is a picture of them marching over Ford End Road Bridge in August 1915. And Bedford actually had all sorts. They had regiments from Liverpool and all over the country arriving in Bedford throughout the course of the war. It was all sort of set up for them. When the Scots were here, they built all sorts of temporary canteens and huts for them, and most of those were used throughout the war by various regiments. If anyone Richard Galley is one of the local experts on that. He gives talks just on the Scottish regiments and their stay in Bedford. And there is also, at the Higgins, there's also a special exhibition there, which is it's free admission, and it's got lots of old photographs of the Scots and lots of memorabilia from their time in Bedford. And that's going on until May. And it's got a room just to itself at the moment in the Higgins, a bit of a club for the Higgins. One of the things that caused great excitement in Bedford was in October, on the 22nd of October, the King visited. It was the first time that a reigning monarch had visited Bedford for possibly 300 years. There's various people may have passed through, but nobody actually visited as a reigning monarch. The last that anyone thought possibly may have passed through was Charles I during the Civil War. But even then it wasn't absolutely certain. It's not actually recorded that he'd actually stopped there. But his troops stopped there overnight. He stopped at Woburn, but he was coming from Huntingdon way, so it's certainly perfectly possible that he followed the line of his troops. But anyway, a couple of pictures. The king is one of these three here. There is a picture from the Bed's Times that actually had a little cross underneath to sit so you could actually tell which one it is. I've got a feeling it's possibly that one in that picture, but it's one or other of those three. One of the things which has been recently digitised is some of the school logbooks. And not every school logbook in the country has been digitised, but we're lucky that the Queen's Park ones have. And this is actually an entry from the 22nd of October 1914 of in the logbook saying that the King visited Bedford. The inspection and review were arranged to take place on Bromham Road, close to here. The registers were marked, closed early, and the children were allowed to go and see His Majesty at 11:30. And quite a few people from Allen's also were allowed to go. They had some people had to stop behind, but a lot of the staff were allowed to go and see the King. And apparently, it was a bit of a nightmare in Queen's Park when the King left. He arrived by train. The field that they did the inspection of the troops was actually on Bromham Road. Just as you head out, just past the sharp bend, the Gallows Corner, it's the first set of fields on the right-hand side as you head towards Biddenham. And when the road was so fully blocked on the way back with all the troops marching back to their quarters in town, that most of the people tried to hurry through Queen's Park in order to try and get to Ford End Road Bridge to catch a glimpse of the King leaving by train from the station, Midland Road. One of the things that they did in Queen's Park as part of their training was digging trenches. And this is actually a map from the 1920s of a proposed housing estate in the Honey Hill Road area. The green bit at the top there is actually where Allen Park is in Queen's Park. The grey is the present line of Old Ford End Road, and the blue is the river. If anyone knows Old Queen's Park, this was Ford End House, which is the old building, the old basically sort of manor house. It was a ruin for many, many years and was knocked down in the early 1960s. But this field here on the Honey Hills, Honey Hill Road now goes in a sort of a loop around there. Before the far end of Honey Hill Road was built, they built practice trenches so they could actually not only practice making the trenches but also fighting in them as well. There was a few around Bedford. There was one at the top of Cemetery Hill as well that was a practice trench, but I haven't got a map or anything of that. What I actually did, having found this map in the archives, there was all these funny wiggly lines. So I've actually marked them in orange to make them clearer, so you can actually see the actual layout of the trenches. Germans obviously weren't very popular, and particularly after the sinking of the Lusitania, there was a number of incidents in Bedford. This one in particular is the Crown pub on the corner of Britannia Road opposite Southwind Hospital. The landlord was a Mr. Kasselweiner. He was actually German, but he'd actually lived in Bedford for 30 years, and he'd actually been a naturalised British citizen for 16 of those. And his wife was English, but they didn't like the fact that he was German. And an unruly mob set on his pub one night in May 1915. The police couldn't cope, and eventually some officers, army officers, tried to quell the mob, and eventually they actually called in troops from Kempston Barracks to come and disperse them. Mr. Kasselweiner and his wife left town the next day. I don't know what actually happened to them, but I don't think they came back to Bedford. Dr. Fashnack who was one of the first doctors in Bedford, doctors in the Queen's Park area. He actually, again, old Queen's Park people would know the surgery on Hurst Road. Yeah.
So was Boyd, he was the leader contender.
Yeah, but this was a long time before that. Yeah. Dr. Fashnack had to write, had a letter in the Beds Times saying that he was actually Swiss. He's got a German sounding name, but he's actually Swiss, and he was born and educated in Bedford, and he hadn't got anything at all to do with the Germans. And there's several in that same edition of the paper. Both of these stories were in the same edition. Same edition, a German teacher from Bedford School also wrote several letters explaining that he hadn't got any truck with the Germans. To start off with, it was volunteers to sign up for the army. By the time we got to the stage where they were losing so many men, voluntary signing up wasn't sufficient. So by the time we get to 1916, the Military Service Act meant that anyone of fighting age was actually put on a list, and you were actually called up for service. Of course, not everyone wanted to go. They published every few weeks in the local papers a list of people they were trying to find. Some of them were obviously given dodgy addresses. We've got someone, Bromham House Gardens, Bromham. I mean, it could have been a gardener at Bromham House, which is Alan's old residence. But we've got ones like the Engine Shed, Newman Lane. I don't think there's any engine sheds down Newman Lane. We've got ones, the cycle track in Bolton Road. There's a few Queen's Park ones that are obviously proper addresses, and what they're actually saying is they want information as to whether they have actually joined the army, or if they're exempt for any reasons, or if anyone actually knows of their whereabouts, so they can track them down, so they can enforce their call up. Hms, obviously, it was the biggest manufacturer in the area, and they also took on all sorts of other jobs during the war. And they were one of a local coordinator for making munitions. And what they actually, this was an advert in the paper, wanted any company or workshop that had the equipment for making munitions to get in touch with them, and they would try and organise a way of actually getting them to help make shell casings and things like that. They weren't actually filling the munitions, they weren't actually arming them or anything, but they were actually required to make the metal casings for them. All sorts of people signed up. This one down here is actually Bedford School, woodwork, sort of metalwork department, getting the young munition workers making what look like little hand grenades or something like that. And this is some equipment that Hms Maori got in, which is for boring out shell cases. It's an interesting picture that Paul gave me only today. This is a field where Alan's Bidman Works was eventually built on, just being laid out. Over in the background would be Bidman Turn, and this is the field being laid out with stakes for the building plots, for building the actual factory buildings. Several people all looking at plans. The only person who doesn't appear to be looking at plans is this person here in military uniform. And he's actually W.H. Allen's grandson, Melville.
He's on guard.
And he's the only one who's actually looking at the camera. All the others are looking at the plans. And this is in June 1916. So Alan's Bidman Works. They've actually purchased the land near the end of 1915 when they got a whole load of new contracts. They actually purchased the site for £6,000, and this is a picture of the site being built. And this is the fairly completed site. It's a sort of a panoramic view with two photographs stitched together. It didn't work quite as well as I liked it to have done, but gives an idea of the extent of the buildings there. And this is a plan of it. This is Old Ford End Road, and this is the main works, which would have come all the way up to Back Lane, or Black Lane, as some people. There's a bit of a dispute as to whether it's called Black Lane or Back Lane, but this would have come all the way up, and this would be the backs of the houses of Westbourne Road, up down that side there. And these are some of the aero engines that they're building. They had a contract to build aero engines at the end of 1915, and the first engines were actually dispatched early in 1916 in March. And by the end of the war, they over 3,000 engines with spare parts to go with them. And as each engine comprised 1,156 components, often, as you could see, they're going to be quite fiddly things. They actually had that the women workers that they were taking on were actually more nimble-fingered than the big-fisted, ham-fisted men, and they could actually put together the components a lot better, or a lot faster. Their testing bay, I don't think would stand much scrutiny to anyone in an engineering company that was testing aero engines these days, just by fixing the engine to an old gun carriage. I thought at the back might have been a block of concrete or something to stop it from moving, but it's probably the tank that's supplying the fuel to it. But as I say, it's rather crude testing of the engines.
Yeah, look, they're all cylinders.
Yeah.
Now we come on to Zeppelins. The Zeppelin menace. Now, these are two adverts, one for fire policy, which only it appeared in most British papers, but appears to have only done once. Whether they were told it was too scary, and they were trying to sort of play on people's minds that no, your house isn't insured if you get hit by a Zeppelin or something coming from a Zeppelin. It's rather graphic, these sort of fire bombs coming down and buildings burning in the background. And a lot of things saying your fire policy does not cover damage from acts of war, so you have to buy a special policy from this company to cover yourself in case of any damage. And of course places like Longhouse and Skinner's got in on the act, making anti-Zeppelin blinds. Various descriptions and sizes. Obviously, blackout lines similar as were used in the Second World War as well. Now we come on to Zeppelins. Zeppelin race first started in 1915 over the East Coast. Places like Great Yarmouth and King's Lynn were bombed in 1915. The first one to get anywhere near Bedford was actually on the night of 2nd and 3rd of September 1916, when Zeppelin L-32 flew very close to Bedford, less than 5 miles from Bedford. In fact, almost over Cardington. Some people were saying, oh, they should have bombed the sheds, but of course that was all that was actually built at the shed number 1. Of course, the second shed was actually one that had originally been built in Norfolk and was transferred here later. But in September 1916, that was shed number 1 at Cardington. Lots of people in reminiscences, and also, very little was in the paper because of they weren't allowed to say. They would say that something had happened in a town in the southeast. But apparently, from people reminiscing afterwards, lots of people were actually down the embankment watching the Zeppelin fly over to the south. And they were also around when the sky lit up, and not that Zeppelin, but another airship was shot down in Hertfordshire. And I've got a little map here that someone's done. The one that passed near Bedford was the L-32. And that passed between Bedford and Biggleswade. And Cardington would be about there, so it was sort of probably about 2 or 3 miles from the sheds of Cardington. It went down over Leighton Buzzard, Tring, Hertford and Ware, and all these symbols are bombs dropped. So it dropped a few bombs in Hertfordshire and then disappeared off back towards the North Sea. The other 16 had also come in from slightly lower down, went past Hitchin, Luton, Dunstable, St Albans, and then headed north, and that again disappeared off over the North Sea, somewhere over the Norfolk coast. But the interesting one is the SL11. That came in over Royston, Hitchin, Luton, dropped a few bombs, tried to penetrate the air defences of London. They had by then searchlights and old naval guns trying to shoot down any Zeppelins that approached London. And also planes from airfields were taken off and actually fighting them in the air. And this particular one, it wasn't actually a Zeppelin, it was one of the wooden-based ones that was a naval airship. And it was shot down over Cuffley in Hertfordshire. A couple of pictures here. Picture at the top there is William Leaf Robinson. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for shooting it down. It was the first German airship to be destroyed over British soil. There's a letter here. It's a "Dear Daddy, I hope you're not alarmed." Was from a schoolboy who had been sent out in the countryside to escape the Zeppelin raids on London. And he's drawn a little map of, there's his house and the road in front of it, and there's the Zepp that flew over his house and crashed into the field on the other side of his house, other side of the road. But he actually says, please don't be alarmed, all is well that ends well. We are quite safe. But they're looking under there, the Zepp dropped here. By this time, they'd actually got special Zeppelin bullets, and one of the most famous ones was a thing called the Pomeroy. There's a thing called the Pomeroy bullet, and it was an explosive bullet. It was designed so that it actually penetrated the more fragile outer casing of the airship, but exploded against the fuel tanks, which had stronger skin inside. Yeah.
Excuse me a minute. Sorry, a minute.
Buy the DVD next time.
And the actual site of the airship coming down was quite a tourist attraction. They actually laid on special trains from London for people to go out to see the wreckage. And they got as many bits of wreckage as possible and sold tiny scraps of them for £1. So you got a piece of wire from one of the. So this is a wooden shell inside this particular airship, so there wasn't so much metal there, but it was braced by wire, so there was a lot of wire there, and they cut off small sections. I've actually seen one in the Imperial War Museum. It's about an inch of it, in a little paper envelope, and they sold them for £1 with the proceeds going to the Red Cross. Now this is the Zeppelin that actually dropped some bombs on or near Bedford. It was about a year later. It was L-53. At the time it was one of the biggest, and it's one of the latest ones. There was they built about a dozen or more of these particular ones. They were known as height climbers because what they did, they could actually climb much higher than any of the previous ones. above the height that any shells could hit them from the ground, and also above the height that any aircraft in those days could actually reach. They were actually so high that the engines couldn't normally be heard from the ground, so the raid that included the bombs dropped on Bedford in October was known as the Silent Raid. And this is a map. It's a French map, because some of the bits up the top over England are a bit dubious, possibly. One of the things is, because they were so high up, the earlier raids, there's actually some very detailed maps of exactly where the airships actually went. But because these were so high up, it was almost impossible to identify them, and it's almost impossible to work out exactly where they were at any one time. But basically, 11 of them came over the North Sea, across the North Norfolk coast or the Lincolnshire coast, and they were heading for industrial Midlands. Unfortunately, they were flying at their normal height of 20,000 feet, and they only had weather forecast for 10,000 feet. And the conditions above that were completely different from what we expected. Because they were the only things that could actually get up that height, none of the reconnaissance missions beforehand identified the fact that there was a very strong wind coming from the north and towards the east. And they actually blew every single one off course, south over the Midlands, South Midlands, and over London and over France. There's a possibility that was one of two Zeppelins that actually dropped the bombs close to Bedford. This one, let's say the L-53, is the one that's far more likely to have gone. The L-45 was also in the air, and that dropped some bombs on Northampton. But I think the consensus is it was the L-53. They were painted very dark blue, sort of a blackish blue, so that you couldn't see them against the sky, as well as them being high and almost silent. The only bit they didn't paint was the top, because dark colours, black or very dark blue, absorbs heat. It was causing problems with the gas expanding too much inside, the hydrogen expanding too much inside. So the top was painted silver, and the rest was a dark colour, which meant it is hardly visible from the ground. So the L-53 is actually the green line, and Bedford is London. Bedford is sort of about there somewhere. So as you can see, it's right on the flight path. And this is the target area. That evening, 4 loud explosions were heard in the Elstow area. This is a map from 1924, which is the nearest date I can get to the actual date of the raid. We know the almost exact position of several of them. One of them, this thing marked GP, is a guidepost or a signpost. One of the direction pointers on that signpost was blasted off with the blast. It actually it said it landed within 10 or 20 yards of that in the field. So it was somewhere there, just to the south of the GP sign. One of them landed just behind Elstow Abbey, probably in that field there. Apparently it split a tree in half. It was somewhere in this sort of area. One landed in or near Elstow Brook. This is Elstow Brook. And the other one landed just the other side of there in a small copse, which is going to be somewhere down there, roughly where the new B&Q is, in fact where they're building some new buildings next to B&Q. Well, now the A6 goes down there, and the Park and Ride is just down here. But in those days, the the road went underneath the bridge on the way, like if you were going to the Interchange Retail Park, which is there. So you've got one there, one probably somewhere there, one somewhere there by the GP sign, and one somewhere over there. So 4 bombs. No casualties, a broken sign and a split tree. Now in 1963, when they were building the Danish Bacon Company on at the bottom of Ampthill Road, which is actually about there, it's now where Vindy's car showroom is. They were digging the footings for the foundations of the factory, and a large metal object appeared. Apparently the workman gave it a couple of smacks with his shovel and then realised maybe he shouldn't have done. And they called in bomb disposal, and it was identified as being a World War I vintage £110 bomb. So that was on that site there. That was taken to Elstow Storage Depot, which still had the facilities, because that was a World War II munitions dump. They still had the areas that had blocked off with, so you could actually explode.
That's polluted ground now, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty well. They think that it's possible that they were actually aiming for this factory here, which was Saunderson's tractor factory. They certainly Saunderson's tractor factory got a telling off because they had lights showing. When they're not sure if they had lights showing before, but certainly when people turned up to find out what had happened with the bombs, there was lights blazing in the factory there. The only interesting thing is that most of the Zeppelins dropped them in 6s. They dropped 24 on the L45 dropped 24 on Northampton. The L53, after leaving here, dropped either 11 or 12 on Heath and Reach, just outside Leighton Buzzard. But originally, obviously, there was definitely 4 explosions. There's one unexploded one. Is there another one? All this land is all built on now, but this field isn't. So whether there's one somewhere in that field, with a distribution of sort of there, and there, there's a possibility there could be something lurking in the middle there. And we're going to stop for a half-time break in a second. October 1916, the Calvary was unveiled at All Saints Church on the east side. It was unveiled by Colonel Henderson, who was commander of the Bedford Army Depot. The outside part was actually made by J.P. White in the Pythal Works on Bond Road. The actual figure of Christ was made by a well-known London carvers, Burns and Co. The mayor was there, various dignitaries. Relatives of fallen soldiers were also given priority, and they were allowed inside the gated area for the service. There's a bit of a dispute over all these so-called roadside shrines at the time, because lots of very strict Church of England congregation weren't very keen on having these, and there was accusations that there's idolatry involved here, and there's people saying, well, we did away with all this in the Reformation. And it's just got one further picture. It's a bit of a blurry one. This is of the same event from a slightly different angle. It's either been taken from a ladder or possibly from the window of what's now the post office on the other side of the road, because it's obviously taken from above the crowd. And again, it's just showing the people there of the actual ceremony of the unveiling of it. So that's going to be the half time. We'll be drawing the raffle. We'll be a break for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll continue with the rest of it. Right, now we come on to the second half of the talk, and the puppet's going to involve winning. women in the workplace were pretty few and far between before the war. Lots of people were obviously fighting for women's rights as suffragettes to get the vote. But women, certainly in the industrial workplace in the south, there'd always been plenty of women working in cotton mills and things like that in the north. But in the south, there wasn't really very much in the way of in industrial work for women. Of course, with men being away at the front, women were needed to fill in the jobs. And this is a picture of, I'm not sure if it's all women workers in September 1916, but certainly quite a large gathering of women workers at Hms Engineering Works, September 1916. By 1917, around about 700 women were working at Allen's in the two factories, and new facilities were needed. I always remember this hall because my father worked at Allen's, and we always had Christmas parties in there. But that was originally built in 1917 for the women workers. And here is the opening tea party. Sitting there with their mugs, cups of tea, and at the end, various kettles and things that don't seem to be any food or anything. Just cups of tea. But women were working in almost all the areas of the factory. I have actually seen a breakdown in 1918 of which men, boys, and women, how many were working in each department. The only departments really that weren't any, were either no or very few women were things like the heavy duty foundry work. But in the smaller foundries, like the brass foundry, making small components mainly for the aero engines, you can see that it's actually almost all women working. And here is a picture from the aero division, group of men sitting down the front, and a woman with a propeller, and another group of lady workers in the background. And I used this for the picture on the flyer and the posters, and I said at the end of the last talk, it was on Armistice Day, or shortly afterwards. But in fact, I found that I've seen this picture in several different places, and it normally, the caption that goes with it normally says, on Armistice Day, the workers being thanked by local military, heads of military locally. But in fact, it wasn't. It was, I found it actually dates back to October 1917, and it was an annual event. It's called Our Day, and it was various sort of fundraising events and talks and presentations with the view to actually raising money for the Red Cross. And this is bottom of Allen's Bridge, Fordham Road Bridge. It's the old engine shed. There. This is the damp old toilets that used to be across the other side of the road, if anyone remembers them. And this is the Lord Lieutenant of Bedfordshire, one of the Whitbread family, being presented to ranks of lady workers. There's lots of street urchins climbing up all the hoardings. And there's a guy on white coming down there thinking, how on earth am I going to get past this?
What's wrong this side?
Is that a Rudy's bell?
Now, the person I showed you in that field, when they were in the uniform, the only one that wasn't looking at the plans, was Melville Allen, who was W.H. Allen's grandson. And he died tragically in a flying accident, actually in a plane that was testing one of Allen's engines. he was he was someone who they reckon was destined for great things. He was educated at Harrow and Trinity College, Cambridge. He worked in the Queen's Engineering Works at Allens, and joined the Royal Flying Corps in 1915. And I say this is in 1917. He was tragically killed. It said in the inquest at Ipswich he was flying at a height of 150 feet and was ascending. The engine stopped and the machine crashed to the ground. Mr. Allen succumbing to his injuries in a few hours. The stoppage of the engine was due to too much or too little oil. The engine was all right before the flight. Brother Allen had already lost one of his sons early on in the war, and this was a major setback for him. And it's no coincidence that the company, once the war was over and the military contract had finished, although he was advised that there was going to be a big thing for aero engines, for civil use, they ceased to manufacture aero engines within a month of the armistice being signed. So by December 1918, the entire production line was shut down. Unfortunately, that also meant that most of the women workers left as well. And this is the tool room, 1918, December 1918, outside Ann's Club. I've shown this before. It looks like it's pouring with rain. Looking at the pavement, the road in front of it, it's certainly glistening. And here you see not so many women by this point. It's only a month or so after the war ended. It may well be that that particular tool shop had fewer women workers in that department anyway, but certainly the women workers are nowhere near as prominent. At this point, actually, in 1918, they were actually getting some people returning from war and actually returning to work. They actually said that about 20 men with loss of limb or eye had returned to work, upwards of 40 who had been wounded in various parts of the body, and about 150 who had suffered in the war from gassing, shell shock or other afflictions, rendering them unfit for further war service. So they're actually starting to get some people returning, some men returning to work anyway. And in the July 1920 Works magazine, it actually says, with the closing down of the aero department, it was necessary with much regret to dispense with practically the whole of the women employed in the works. The dining hall built for the women is now used for the men, and the large hall of the Institute is utilised for the education of the boys in the works. So the main hall inside the Young Club was designed was designated as a boys' education area, and the large hall was reverted back to men. Towards the end of the war, it wasn't quite so much. Yes, it's a good advert. There was started to get food shortages. Sometimes I've seen reports that there were queues because they'd heard that potatoes were in stock in a particular greengrocer on Ford End Road and things like that. But one of the things that, and it originated in Queen's Park was the first place in Bedford to have one, was the Queen's Park Pig Club. Based on the Coventry Arms and Coventry Road. This is slightly early pictures around the turn of the century. And they actually had 8 sties and around about 80 pigs. And they were on the fields roughly where the allotments are now, and the fields leading up to Bromham Road, often used to be known as Quenby's Field. But the corporation had offered to provide pig food. They said it was pig food, not swill. It was mainly leftovers from staff canteens and school canteens. And they charged 2 old pence for a 3-gallon bucketful. And school children were paid to go foraging for things like acorns and that type of thing to feed. And they were also given, I shouldn't imagine they were given very much, a halfpenny or something, but they were given money for providing acorns and other specified materials to feed the pigs. Obviously, Ambage's butchers, they would buy them. There was apparently about 80 members of the club, and there was 80 pigs. So each member of the club had a designated pig. And after having been 300 years or so, at least, since the last royal visit, we have another one. June 27th, 1918, King George V visited Bedford for the second time. This time he brought the Queen Mary with him. Came by train again. His car was brought up the day before. It was met at Midland Road Station, driven over the bridge, and driven to Hms Allen's. This is a souvenir edition of the Allen's Works magazine. There. It's the front cover, and there's a copy of the signatures of King George and Queen Mary from the visitors book. And here's the King arriving. We've shown this photograph before, and I'm sure the photographer is probably cursing this bloke here, who appears to be standing in the way. And he looks like he sort of just missed it by a fraction of a second, so they've only really got the back of the car. I'm sure he wanted the car to be there, and if this person wasn't standing there, he probably would have got it. But there's entering the office workers' gate. This is the manual workers' gate to the factory. This is the office workers to the Hms Allen's offices.
That's still there as well, isn't it?
No, it's
Part of the gate is still there.
vacant ground now, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's some of the railings.
The railings are still there, something.
Oh yeah, that's the
And this is the arrival of the royal car at the entrance to the offices. His Majesty getting out. One of the people who was part of the Guard of Honour was quite an incredible bloke. I was with John in the library on Tuesday, and we found this bloke, Sergeant Biggs, who, believe it or not, he was still working. He was 86 years old. He was actually a veteran of the Crimean War in the 1850s. And he'd worked for Allen's for over 40 years. He'd come up from London when they moved from London to Bedford. And so he was one of the ones who was presented to the king. He still had his Crimea service medals. And here's a picture of Hms Allen and Queen Mary and the King following just behind, being presented. And you can see at this point how many women workers there were at in the factory. And this is the royal car leaving the factory down the main road out. You can actually go out through the workers' gate, this bit. Now, I'm just got a bit of an experiment. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I've got a Pathé News video of the visit. It doesn't work, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't show very much. It was very jerky when I was playing it on my PC at home. No, it's not. I don't think it's going to work. So I'm actually going to go on to the end of the war. After the war ended, 1918, various memorial buildings were built all around the country, and in the church here, they were going to build a memorial chapel that the money that was required for building the chapel wasn't going to be available, so they put a stained glass window in instead, which is at the east end of the church, just next to us. This is a picture of it in 1920 when it was installed, and this is a more recent picture in colour of the actual stained glass. But you notice along the top here there's all the countries that are allies. There's Belgium, Great Britain, France, and this is actually Savoy, the Savoy region, which is then an independent country on the borders of France and Italy. And the memorial tablets outside with the names of the people who had been killed during the First World War, they were inaugurated. The Calvary was moved. It was originally on the grass, but it was moved onto a stone step, and the two tablets with all the names on were put behind it on the wall. And there were originally 82 names. There's actually 90 on there in total. And when we did the centenary magazine for the church, I actually had a go at trying to identify where everyone lived. And we managed to identify about 50 or 60 of them, the exact house where they lived. And I did this map based on the 1924 Ordnance Survey, with a little poppy on each house where someone had fallen in the First World War. You'll notice that one of them, on Hurst Grove, there's three. There's the Prentice family. Three sons were killed during the First World War. Two within a few months of each other in 1917, and the other one died of his wounds shortly afterwards. Now, on this, since I did this, so that was 5 years ago, there's been more information being available, like the 1911 census, which wasn't available at that time, and quite a lot more stuff has been available online. And at the moment, it's going to be a bit of a task. I'm trying to identify everyone who served in the First World War in Queen's Park. I'm doing it street by street. I'm starting off in the street that I live in. Because we've got Donville Road. And this is what I've managed to find so far for Donville Road. And what I've actually got is the actual little blobs. Red blob signifying someone who died during the First World War. Amber was someone who was injured, and a green blob for someone who came back from the war relatively unscathed. Of course, you don't know what psychological damage they may have had, but they certainly didn't suffer any known injuries. As you can see, there's quite a variety of various things. There's actually 4 people I've identified as being killed during the war. But there's a number of people, number 32, there was a Mr. Jackson who was gassed. Number 23, which is your house, yes. This person, Mr. Collardine, was invalided out in 1918, having been struck by lightning. I presume that on open ground or something like that. So I suppose it was.
It doesn't have to.
One person won the military medal, number 5. In fact, there's two Francis brothers. One was seriously wounded and died in 1918. The other one was wounded on the Somme and was awarded a military medal. One lost left eye, one lost left leg in the road as well. All the ones with nothing against them. I've actually got some details of their actual their military career, but all I was putting on here was anything significant that actually happened to them. Now, having gone from the Queen's Park, focused in on one road, I'm now going to focus in on one house. Number 100, Higglesby Road. which is just out there. If you go out the front of the church and walk down the pathway in front of the church, 100 is just outside. Most of these details actually come from the National Roll, which was a book which was intended to cover the whole of the country after the First World War and would cover everyone who fought and served. And it gives brief biographical details of each person. Now, not everyone is covered by it. Not all areas are covered. We're lucky that Bedfordshire is covered by it, but not everyone who fought in Bedfordshire is actually in it. I know there's definitely some people missing. And also some quite big errors in it as well. One thing here, Petty Officer Starmore, who died on the HMS Hampshire, they've got the year wrong. It was 1916, and they've actually got 1915 as the date for it. So they're a whole year out. They've got the right day, but they're a year out. But basically, we've got a house here, 100 Diddlesey Road, just a normal terrace house. About 3 doors from the end, there's a barber shop on the corner now, and it's 3 doors down from there. And we've got 5 people from that house, all served. One was a prisoner of war, from 1915 onwards, and the other 4 all died. Private Stennin was killed quite early on in Gallipoli in 1915. Petty Officer Starmore was drowned on the Hampshire. I've got some details more about that in a second. 2 gunners, Gunner F. Starmore and Gunner L. Starmore, they were both killed in 1917. And the only one who survived the war was Officer Steward A. Starmore, who was taken prisoner and was a prisoner of war in Germany from 1915 onwards. So these bits are all from the details from the National Roll, and so is this one here. And these 3 are from the Bedfordshire Times, obituaries from the Bedfordshire Times. And the relation between the Stennins and the Starmore is that this person's husband, this is the husband of Mrs. Starmore, and she was, Mrs. Stennin, who lived at number 100, was the sister of these 4. There's actually 6 in the family, but 4 of them fought. 4 of the men fought, and Mrs. Starmore, Julia Starmore, married Stennin, and he died as well. And just a few little details about this. The person who was taken prisoner of war was on the destroyer, HMS Maori. It's a photograph of the HMS Maori. And this is a postcard of a squadron of destroyers, and this is the Maori here. And apparently what happened was they were off the coast of Belgium. They were actually doing reconnaissance for bigger ships laying further out to sea that were going to shell the German positions on the shore. And the HMS Maori struck a mine. It did badly, no one was killed, and one of the other destroyers in the squadron sent a ship off to take off the people who were actually on the Maori. But the shore batteries started opening up, and the other destroyer scarpered, leaving the Maori plus a boat with some of its crew on that was trying to pick up survivors before the ship sank. 2 trawlers came along and picked them up, but unfortunately they were German trawlers. So they were taken to German-held Belgium and were prisoners of war for the rest of the war. So this is the Maori, that's one of the Starmores. The other one, Petty Officer, was on the HMS Hampshire. it only just fought in the Battle of Jutland in 1916, when it was allocated to what was supposed to be a secret mission, and Lord Kitchener was going to be sort of a group were going to go across the top of Norway to Russia on some sort of mission. I don't know if it's ever been revealed exactly what they were supposed to be going on. Lord Kitchener had actually been on a battleship to start the flow in the Orkneys and was transferred to what was considered to be a fast battle cruiser, HMS Hampshire, which is this one, in its dazzle colours, tried to put off U-boats. But unfortunately, when it left harbour at Scarborough Flow, within a couple of hours of leaving, it hit a mine and sank with virtually all hands. There was about a dozen people survived. Kitchener and none of his party survived, and their bodies were never found. So that's the Hampshire. This is a memorial, actually in Hampshire. This is actually at Winchester Cathedral, and over 700 people were killed on the Hampshire. And that's General Kitchener on his most famous poster. This is a telegraph from the Hampshire. Well, it's actually from London to Saffron Walden. It's to a printer, so it's probably to a local newspaper. It actually says official: Hampshire mined or torpedoed off Orkneys last night. Kitchener and staff aboard en route to Russia, feared all lost. And this was a rare photograph. And someone actually took a photograph before the Hampshire left, and this was the only a few hours before the Hampshire set sail on its fateful last voyage. So that basically is the end of my talk. If anyone's got any questions about anything that I've been talking about, I'll be willing to answer them.
I really like the task you've set yourself of finding every First Includes part that's served.
Yeah.
Apart from the national role, what other resources are you using?
Well, there are various things on the online, things like Find My Ancestor and Ancestry.com and things like that. Unfortunately, a lot of paper records were actually destroyed during the Second World War, during the Blitz. And there's going to be a bit of a lag, like for instance the 1931 census. People are going to be very disappointed when that's going to be released, because most of that was destroyed in a fire during the Blitz in London. And a lot of paper military records also went. But there are a lot of things that are available. There's lots of things available on the lines of hospital reports and things like that. So people have been wounded that you can find now. It's not very easy to find, but it is available. Certainly some people, you may be able to find their actual hospital report of exactly what happened when they were taken to the hospital and being treated for wounds. The 1911 census is going to be quite handy, because when I did the original one, 1901 census was the only thing that was available, and obviously most of these people were only in their teens, so they would only have been young children, or may not even have been born. So if anyone was sort of signed up, a few people signed up underage, so you will, and of course a lot of people would have lived at completely different addresses. Whereas if you get a source which is closer, 1911 is going to be that much closer, so hopefully some of the families, you'll be able to see the parents and the list of, say the son may be 14, 15 in 1911, being of age to serve by the time we get to 1914, 15. One thing I don't know if anyone's heard of History Pin. It's an online thing where you can actually pin various things, like a map pin, a virtual map pin to a map, and then you can tag various documents to that, photographs or anything else. And they're actually doing a special project at the moment, and I think there's only about eight places doing it at the moment. Bristol Cathedral apparently is the top one doing it, going through their lists of people who fell in their area during the First World War, and tagging as many documents to it. So if you found it's the sort of thing you can build up over a period of time. If you happen to find a couple of things related to a particular person, if they're already tagged, you actually add another document to it, and then when you go online, you click on the pin, and all the things relating to that particular house or whatever or area comes up. And that's one of the things I'm planning to do. It's going to be a long-term project. I hope to finish it by 2018.
You love it, don't you? Really do.
But anything else?
Can you get a 1921 census as well?
There's a 100-year embargo on censuses. So the 1911 one was available in 2011. The 1921 one will be available in 2021.
Is that all on all censuses?
So
Is that always on all censuses?
that's on all censuses, yes. Yeah, no. So all censuses. Obviously, it's every 10 years, but they don't release. They release information about areas, so you can get the population of towns and cities and villages. But they don't release the individual information on the households until 100 years afterwards. So we've got another 7 years to wait before the 2021 comes out.
You talked about the old sergeant who fought in the Crimea War.
Yes.
It occurred to me outside the Swan Hotel was the big memorial to the Boer War.
To the Boer War,
Have
yes.
we any evidence of anybody who fought in both the Boer War and the Great War? Because it could well have been.
It's possible. I haven't got anyone. Some of the ones I've found were already serving, and there was people who had served from about 1905.
Yeah.
So they'd already done 9 years service when the war broke out. But I haven't found anyone that goes back any further than that. But it's perfectly possible. It's not that far apart. So it's someone who served in the late teens or early 20s at the turn of the century, would only be in the late 30s, 40s by the time the First World War broke out. Anybody else?
Do you have evidence of soldiers changing regiments? My grandfather joined the Bedfordshire Regiment, and when he was killed in the Somme, he was attributed to the Gloucester Regiment.
Right. I've come across odd ones that appear to change. Whether that's actually a transcription error at some point.
This came from the Imperial War
This came from the Imperial War Museum.
Yes.
Although the regimental system meant that generally you were in a regiment and you stopped with that regiment, it must be possible because some regiments were almost completely wiped out. So there were almost certainly some people who, if there was only a remnant of one regiment, they would probably try to get it into another regiment of the same. But it is perfectly possible that some people may be transferred to a different regiment fighting in the same area.